Greetings, humans.
Welcome to another episode of Humans of the Multiverse, where we share the stories of our friends from all over the globe.
We hope you find this conversation interesting and uplifting. Our goal is to bring people together, so if you enjoy the interview, we'd love to hear your comments.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Darlene, aka the Cosmic Librarian, is a fascinating woman who has lived a life filled with anomalous wonder and paranormal events. She's had many out-of-body experiences, encounters with spirits, episodes of lost time, UFO/UAP encounters, as well as past life memories to include memories of ancient Egypt.
Throughout her early life, she kept many of these experiences to herself. However, as she's reached retirement age and with the wonders of the internet, she's begun to share her story and connect with others in the world of the paranormal. These days, she has taken the role of a mentor and guide to others who are experiencing the unexplainable.
Check out her interview on the Perceptions Today podcast, as well as this interview to find out how she got her nickname, the Cosmic Librarian. We hope you enjoy this episode of Humans of the Multiverse. I had somewhat of an existential crisis. I don't really know why, but like Saturday morning, I was like, something needs to change. I gotta do something different. And I was like in the bathroom, like, no, am I gonna do this? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do it. And I was like, I don't even know what I was doing.
Summer, so it'll be a summer haircut.
Exactly. Well, it's Darlene. Welcome to the Multiverse. We're really excited to have you on the show today. You were recommended by Paul from Perceptions Today.
Good guy.
Yeah, great guy. He's the best. He's given us a whole bunch of cool contacts, including yourself. So thanks so much for joining.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here to talk to you.
Very cool.
It's great to meet you. And we ought to think about taglining our show Perceptions Yesterday or Perceptions Tomorrow or something. Perceptions Today is a really cool show.
Yeah, it was a real, I haven't been affiliated with it too much in the last couple of years, but a lot of things have happened, as you well know. Mm-hmm. And, but Paul and I knew him before he started that, and we went back and forth a lot over the years. And we've both been through our own health crises and all kinds of things. So he's a really good guy, really nice man. And I miss him because I don't get to speak with him as much as I used to.
Yeah, I really am getting to know him the last few months, and I had the opportunity to talk to him on the phone a bunch of times. And he's just a very thoughtful, helpful guy. He's always trying to help. He is. And he really likes building this community, and so it's good stuff. And so I guess let's start from the top, Darlene.
Okay.
So like who are you? Where are you from? What was life like growing up on planet Earth for Darlene?
Okay, so I was born a very, very long time ago in a country far, far away. No, I was born in Texas, and I'm like a 7th generation Texan.
Okay.
So that's where I live now. I still live in Texas, and despite all the weird stuff, it's still my home. Basically, I started out living in when I was born in South Texas, in a fairly rural community. It wasn't real rural, but most of the people either worked in oil and gas or in ag, raising cows and all that. So my childhood was, for me, was very nature centered, and I'm still very nature centered. It's living things, and nature in general is my thing. That is where I feel at home. And so I grew up in South Texas, where it wasn't exactly the most beautiful place. But, my mother would tell you that I was a problem. I was a good kid, and I was really smart, but I liked having jars of bugs and critters in my room at all times. So I wasn't scared of bugs or frogs or any of that. And I was a very inquisitive kid when it came to stuff like that. And my mother and my family would tell you that they knew I was different from the get go. I'm not like anybody else in my family, really. And I was way too intelligent, and they didn't quite know how to handle that. And when I was a kid, just to put this in perspective, I'm 72. So when I was a kid, they didn't know what to do with girls. It's kind of like, well, she's really smart, but she, it was kind of like that. So, and on top of that, on top of being inquisitive and everything else, I had this other stuff going on in the background. I always had an awareness of things going on that other people couldn't see. I mean, I didn't like, I remember as a kid being aware that something was right here, and I was reluctant to look at it. And now it didn't matter if there were people in the room or not. It's not like I was scared or anything, but I did realize very young that I was aware of things that other people weren't. So I kind of bottled it up, is what I did.
Right.
And I didn't talk about that with friends or family. I just knew that awareness was there. And as I grew older, I had some opportunities and some really interesting people I got to meet. Jacques Cousteau and Richard Feynman, I got to hear speak in person. I don't know if you know who he is. But, yeah. But so I was one of those kids that was very, very smart, very intelligent, very inquisitive, but I didn't know where to put it. And at the same time, I was very artistic. So when I went to college, I majored in theater arts. And I acted for a while in theater arts and did plays and things like that. But all this other stuff was always going on in the background. I was always aware of this other stuff. And I remember some people that I knew back then telling me that, you can only bottle it up so long, and then it will just, it will explode literally out of you. And so some 20, maybe 30 years ago, I started to just kind of embrace, the stuff that was coming out. And I didn't hide it. I mean, I didn't go around and yell to the world, but I became more open with people that knew me really well and say that, there's some things about me that are a little different, and this is what they are. So I was aware of things around me. I had been studying UFOs, the paranormal, and all of that since I was about 13. I did a science fair project. Now you got to take this into account, the year. This was like about 67 or 68. I did a science fair project on UFOs.
Nice.
At the science fair. And nobody, it was really strange. I've thought about it many times, and my instructor, my science teacher, who encouraged me to go into science, and he was trying to encourage me as a girl to do it because he knew other girls weren't doing it. And he didn't even make fun of me about what my topic was. So I became very aware of UFOs. And I studied them to the nth degree for years. So I've always done that. At the same time, I'm an experiencer. I can't say I've been abducted. If I have, I don't have any awareness of it. But, I had that. And also, I'm aware of things that are going on. I sometimes know things are going to happen before they happen. Time slips. Oh, my God. Those are the strangest for me. It's like, I've had those more than once. Yep. And it's like, it's a very weird feeling when the time slip happens. And 1 minute this is going on, the next minute that is something else has happened. So I have those too. So I can tell you that I've had every kind of experience there is practically. I haven't had a near-death experience, but we'll touch on that later. But to put in perspective, I became a professional banker. I was a professional banker and in finance for years. And then I finished out the last 10 years that I worked full time in public health. So I have a public health background as well. And so by then I was already coming out more about who I was and the things that I knew and that. And I got to know quite a few people after that because I was willing to speak up. So after that, the last few years, of retirement and all that, I can devote more time to it, not feel weird about it, talk to people, meet new people like you, and talk about it openly. And I wasn't worried about being made fun of. It was more about protecting my friends, my family, and all that from whatever things that would spill out or ripple out and affect them. But now I'm not in that place anymore, and it's really nice.
That does sound nice. It's like it must be freeing, right?
It is freeing. It's very freeing. And so I because of that and my openness, I got to get acquainted with Paul. And Paul and I shared a lot of stuff that was going on with both of us. And I've met people through him. And so I correspond with quite a few different people now that I couldn't have dreamed of doing like 20 years ago. And so it's been a really interesting journey, and it's not over yet. And as you know, the world is going through some really weird stuff right now.
Oh yeah,
the government, the world, everything is quite strange. And I don't think the strangeness for me is over with yet. And maybe we'll touch on that a little bit later, but I can tell you that it's been very interesting. And if I can get people, I'm not a person that wants to beat you over the head with me being a psychic or whatever. I just want to put information out there and let people understand and realize how much potential they have. That is the thing, because we are so much more than we know. And I want people to understand that and start exploring.
Yeah, I think that there's never been a better time in human history to do that. I wanted to rewind a little bit and ask about the UFO Science Fair project. How much do you remember about what it was about and the content of it?
What information was even available?
A lot of Jacques Vallée, because at that time nobody knew who he was really back then. Like 67 or 68. Only people like me, and I was a kid, like 13 years old, something like that. And I studied all of his stuff. I've still got a bunch of his books on my shelf. I really respect him at this point in my life. After all these years, I respect him about as much as anyone. He's a genius, and he didn't have to do UFOs. I mean, he's an investor. He's a scientist. He's like the everyman. And he's very honest, very soft-spoken. I've never met him. That's my dream, is to meet him just once. But I remember that. I remember Alan Hynek very well and who he was. And so I based a lot of my science fair project on various people, but that's where I got my good information. And I remember making a flying saucer out of a hubcap.
Very cool.
Put lights on it and the whole bit. But it was a lot of fun. And like I said, it was amazing that it just still amazes me. People made fun of me for a lot of stuff then because I was kind of a geeky science girl. But nobody made fun of me because of my science fair project, and that kind of amazed me.
So it was received well then?
It was received well. It was like, oh wow, really? Okay. But I also did, in the same science teacher, I did experiments with psi abilities and all that in his class one time. I did an actual presentation where I had the cards and everything. And there was another person in the class. He was a genius kid. He was that kid that got into college when he was 16. But we were friends, and I remember that I used him, and he was very skeptical, right? But boy, was he spot on with cards and all that with the demonstration I did for the class. So I was exploring that as well. So, but the UFO thing is the one thing that stayed with me, and I followed it for years. And once in a while, I follow Whitley Strieber a lot, and I've actually gone back and forth with him online a few times. He knows who I am too, but it's something that I'm really interested in. But I don't have the typical. I don't know what it is, and I'm not. A lot of people, well, it's people from Mars, or it's this, or it's that, or I'm like, no, I am not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd rather look at it both from a spiritual level and a scientific level. And I've got a little thing that I made myself, a Venn diagram I made that I look at often that I made. That's basically, it has the science and the unknown on one side and the spiritual, paranormal, etc. on this side. And then in the middle is that third thing that marries those two things. And that tends to be the way I look at things. I look at them first from a scientific point of view and say, well, I know that this thing happens when blah, blah, when it's a certain kind of weather pattern or whatever. I know the science behind it. But then I look at, well, that didn't explain it either. So what else could it be? And then it's the spiritual aspects, which are the strangest to me.
I think you have to look at everything like that nowadays. I mean, or just in general, because you look, science is like what we can know and what we can test. Spiritual is everything else. And there's way more everything else, and so you have to take that into consideration.
Yeah, that and the fact that we don't know what we don't know.
Exactly.
I mean, I think that's key because, in Galileo's time, they knew nothing. So whenever somebody came up with some real science, they were like, well, we don't know about that. That's not what the church says. So, it took time for those ideas, science to come forward and things to change. Unfortunately, I feel like we're in a period right now where science is being quashed.
Stalled.
And that worries me too.
Stalled out.
And I don't want to go into all the details on that, but if you're aware of what's going on in the world right now and what they're doing with science and how it's being denigrated by some people, it kind of frightens me more than anything else is people choosing ignorance over knowledge. And right now, I think it's very important for people like me, people like you, to stay grounded and try to keep our heads on straight while, as that famous poem says, while those about you, or the one by Kipling, where he says, when those about you are losing their heads, you keep yours. So that's what I really want to do, is encourage people to learn, to grow, and go study this weird thing, study this scientific thing, study as much as you can, however you can within your scope of life, because I've been a mother and a wife and all that stuff, and I worked full time. And so I know how hard it is to put that stuff on the back burner. But if you can take a moment and meditate or whatever it takes, listen to sacred music or whatever it is that floats your boat and get you going that next level. And it's not the same for everyone. Everyone needs something different, and it's an individual thing, but the goal is the same.
Elevate consciousness.
Exactly.
Yes. You mentioned sort of problems with science earlier, and we can go into the details if you would like, but would it suffice to say that science is sort of a way of thinking and processing information, and then there's these institutions which house science, and some of that institutional thinking is turned into an anti-scientific type of thing, but it's still called science, today. That's basically the problem that has gone on.
Yeah, I can relate to that. When I was in public health, I worked with vaccines.
Okay.
And as a child, my health was ruined by measles. I got a really horrible case of measles, And as a result, my immune system was they know now, they didn't know then. They just knew that my immune system was shot for about 3 years. And I ended up in the hospital. I had a very close call. But I know now, knowing the information I know, and the science that's come along since then, that measles totally compromises the immune system for up to, it rewrites the immune system. It like puts it back to zero in some cases. And so for 3 years, I was like that. I got everything that came along. I was sick. If anybody got sick with whatever, I got it 10 times worse because my immune system couldn't handle it. So that's an example of ignorance now. Is I know that nothing's perfect. Not even vaccines are perfect. But all I know is kids don't die of polio in this country anymore. The kids aren't crippled because of polio anymore because of a vaccine that was developed that nipped it in the bud. So that's an example of science. And now we've got people, not just religious people. It's just people that, oh, we don't do that. We're not doing that. I don't trust them. They kill people. And I'm like, well, a lot more people were dying of measles and still die of measles in places like Africa. Thousands of children die in Africa every year from measles, but nobody in our country can relate to it, right? So, but we do know that vaccines are effective. We do know they're not for everyone. Some kids cannot take them. But it's a science that's being quashed right now. And as a result, there are measles taking off in this state and other states around us. So
has the science of psi phenomena or like paranormal aspects, has that been quashed as well over the
yes,
years, or have you seen that improve? Maybe having followed it for so
I've
long.
seen an improvement. Well, if I'd said anything like 50 years ago about some of the stuff I'm interested in and my experiences, everybody would be going, oh, okay. But now people go, really, tell us more. Really? How do I do? I've had people tell me, they say, you're so lucky. I wish I could do that. And I'm like, well, you can, but be careful what you wish for.
Right.
Because it's something that I think as a person, you've got to have a maturity level to handle it in the right way. I don't know how to say that, but it's a good thing to have. It helps you be aware of what's going on around you in a way that maybe other people don't see. But it brings some things that you can't do anything with.
Right.
So, for instance, if you meet someone and you have a horrible feeling about that person, and you think that person is, or is dangerous or whatever, but how do you tell somebody? Well, my instinct tells me to avoid this person, whatever.
Right.
But you can't really say that because it's like, well, how do you know? Well, I just have a feeling. Well, why would you go by your feeling? Or do we give this person a chance? So I tend to give people a chance, but I can tell you that it's very hard. I won't even talk about that part of it, but it's really hard when you know certain things are going to occur,
right,
unless something changes. And because I don't personally believe that things that I see are written in stone.
Right.
Because what is it, the butterfly effect? I heard about that. That is really true. And there's something.
I was going to say, applying the butterfly effect to the nonlinearity of time, which is what we're on the cusp of discussing, then you really unlock a lot of possibilities.
That's exactly right. And why I'm one of those people, I don't see past, present, future.
Yep.
Like I remember what people call past lives. I don't call them past lives. I call them other lives. I tend to think that I don't call it belief. I don't like that word belief. But I tend to think, based on my own experiences, that there's just now. all we have is now, but at the same time, it's an eternal now.
Yeah.
And so when I say I remember another life, it's something that my consciousness taps into
Yes.
as if it were now. Let me give an example. Several years ago, I was reading the newspaper. It was just a typical Saturday morning. I was reading the newspaper, and they had an article in there about some monks that were going to be at the Ransom Center here in the Austin area, and they were going to build one of those big, beautiful sand mandalas that they do. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they're gorgeous. It takes them days to make one. And the picture in the paper was from up above, and you could see the Tibetan monks leaning over and building this thing. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I remembered I was a monk in Tibet a very long time ago. And my brother monks and I were in prayer as how do I put this? As we were being invaded by Genghis Khan. And in this memory, all of my brother monks were being cut down, and they stayed in prayer while it was happening, and they just, they didn't fight back. And I got angry. I was very angry, and I'm like, I decided to fight back. I was like, why aren't you fighting back? And of course, I didn't last 2 seconds before I was cut down too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that one thing, that one flash of that picture in the newspaper, that happened to me. And so I made a point, my partner and I went to the Ransom Center a few days later to see them finish up that mandala. And I can tell you that watching them do that, even now, it chokes me up. It was a real feeling. And they, of course, when they make these mandalas, which takes them days to do, and they're beautiful colored sands, it's just really gorgeous. As soon as they finish it, guess what? They sweep it up, and they take it and they pour it into. They usually pour the sand into a nearby stream or river. But so I got to be there for when they did that, and then it brought back this memory or something going on at that time that I remembered, and it was very profound, and it explained a lot to me about who I am and the beliefs I have. I also have white buffalo calf woman back there too.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not like this religion or that religion or spiritual belief. I've tried to become familiar with every spiritual belief I can, and read as much. Like I've read the Tibetan Book of the Dead and all that, and so I've read the Bible. I was raised in a very fundamentalist faith in South Texas, so how I turned out the way I did is kind of interesting, that I am where I am now, and that I have these experiences like that one. That one was quite real to me.
Mm-hmm.
Very real.
Yeah, you had mentioned someone needs to have a maturity level to experience some of this stuff, or an awareness. And after you told that story, it was obvious why, because that, as a memory, like it seems like a memory to you, would be rather traumatic. So
It was.
There must have been some processing to be done after something like that, right?
Well, let's put it this way. After I looked at that thing, and all that stuff came to me in a flash.
Right.
And I mean, I wish I could say it went on for 10 minutes. It's like everything that happened to this person came to me in a flash. and I cried like a baby before I even saw the monks at the ransom center. But it was like and this was the weird part. To me, the really weird part is he felt so guilty. He felt guilty because he lost his temper. He felt guilty because he struck back. And me, told him, it is not your fault. You've got to forgive yourself because you're only human. You're only human. And you cared about these people and your brother monks. So let go of that. And I healed myself. It was really weird because I felt this big weight come off of my shoulders in that moment. So
very interesting.
Kind of the closing of the loop.
It was the closing of the loop. And, I'm not a Buddhist now, but I have read Buddhist teachings, and I understand it's not really a faith. It's more of a philosophy and a way of being than a religion. I don't want to call it a religion.
Right.
But so, it's kind of that's one thing I've remembered. I mean, I've had several other lives or other, instances where I've remembered things, and it can be quite healing. And it's nothing, it was totally unexpected. I mean, I was reading the newspaper and then bam, there it was.
Right.
It makes me wonder if, like, just me, for example, has some loop I need to close in the quantum continuum that I'm not aware of. You know what I mean?
There's probably a lot that you're not aware of. I mean, and you probably won't know that until that moment that something you go, oh.
I think that the concept of reincarnation and just the idea of a past life is helpful as a tool to understand, or an idea to understand. But I'm beginning to suspect that it is far more multiplicitous and multifaceted than just a one-to-one. You're a human, you're not a human. What do you think? Like many aspects to everything.
I studied reincarnation for years, trying to understand things that had happened to me, and the Edgar Casey stuff, just the different people that had past life memories, including people that weren't religious. That little boy, like about 20 years ago, that all of a sudden remembered his life as a downed airman during World War II. I don't know if you remember that little boy, but
yeah, I do. Yeah, I heard that story.
And so I remember when they actually had the stories, and his parents and the little boy, like on 60 Minutes or whatever. This was years ago. And that little boy grew up. Of course, he doesn't remember any of it now.
Yeah, that's typical.
And so his parents know, and other people around him know, and there's TV shows and stuff about it. But he himself does not remember what he was remembering when he was a little kid. And so, and memories are a very, very strange thing. It's a very strange thing. And I think, and I'm one of those people that my family used to get amazed at me because I could remember things that nobody else could remember, even in this life. Like when I was 2, my mother goes, "How did you remember that?" "I don't remember that when you were 2. But and so I have a way of remembering things. I don't know how I do it or why I do it. I just do. And so it only stands to reason that at some point those past life things would start coming in. And for me, I think they actually started coming in when I was about 10, and I didn't realize that's what they were.
That's something I was thinking about earlier. The story you described with the Buddhist monks, if you had that download of information at a young age, you may have simply not known what to do with it. It may have been like a nightmare or just a scary experience. Who knows? I think we've all probably had stuff that happened to us as little kids. We don't remember it now as adults, and we didn't know what to do with it at the time we experienced it as a little kid. So who knows what to do?
Well, my own sons, I'm not going to say their names because I don't want to take attention on embarrassing them. But my older son, I remember he was about 3. And I had all kinds of, so I have memories from Egypt more than one life. And but when he was little, when my kids were little, I didn't talk about this stuff. I didn't want to paint things for them and have them, we talk about things, but I didn't take it real far when they were little kids, not old enough to understand. So one day, my son was about 3. We were listening to the 1812 Overture. And that particular thing by Tchaikovsky is a well-known piece of music. But I had the album cover. In those days, we still had platters, not CDs. Was a picture of this of the battle that is actually referenced in that piece of music. It's where the French battled the Russians. And so it was a painting of that was the cover. And I remember my son had his thumb in his mouth. He was a thumb sucker at that age. And he popped that thumb out of his mouth. And he loved listening to that music, by the way. He pointed at the cover and he goes, "Mom, I was there." And I just looked at him and I said, "Oh, really?" He goes, "Yep, I was there." And I didn't pursue it because I didn't want to go, no, you aren't. I just let it. I thought, "So that's interesting." And then another time we were looking at books about Egypt, and he loved looking at those as well. I had all kinds of books about archaeology and ancient Egypt and all that. And we came to a picture of Nefertiti that was of a bust that was made of her, not that famous bust, the beautiful one. This was her. It's just granite, and it's in when she's like middle aged, like maybe 40ish back then, which is the old age in those days. And he popped that thumb out of his mouth again. And he goes, "That's you, Mama." And I went, "Really?" I said, "Well, I'm right here." He said, "Okay, that's you, Mama." I said, "Okay." So whenever my kids would come up with things, I would just treat it as something natural and not give them the 3rd degree or anything, and hoping once they got older and I could introduce them more to some things that I have experienced, and they could do it in a way that was natural for them, not forced on them.
Right.
And my older son is very similar to me now, but he keeps it at bay because he's got a home and family right now, and he's waiting for his kids to get older before he talks about it.
That's exactly the same way you navigated from school to theater to your professional life and then to raising kids. You struck a good balance between not dwelling on these things and not sort of blasting them out to everybody, but also not ignoring them and not belittling them or not putting it away, just sort of observing it and then moving on.
Yeah, and just saying, well, that's interesting because I think it's real easy to dismiss kids. Oh, it's just your imagination. Oh, it's that or that.
Right.
No, it's not. I think until kids reach a certain age, they do see and experience things. A lot of stuff that we blow off to imagination or an imaginary friend or whatever is once they get be about 5 or 6 when they start school, that's when it goes, and then it gets buried. And some kids retain it. I retained it, but what I realized I retained it and didn't make it a big issue with my family because I didn't want to deal with them and how they would. I didn't want anybody to. I didn't want my family to think I was weird, even though they already thought I was weird. I didn't want them to think I was any weirder than they already knew. So,
right,
it's a hard line to go down, but I think it can be done. I think I've done it pretty well. My sons are pretty good, well-adjusted people, and they have their own gifts too, but that they're playing it smart, and I guess that's the best way to do it in this weird reality we live in.
World, in this phase of reality, we got to play it smart.
Yeah, we got to be careful with what we say and do, and so that is the way. I mean, a lot of people will say, "Why don't you write a book? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that?" I said, "Well, I don't think I want to do that right now. That's not the way I do it. I'd rather touch people that I encounter day to day, and make a little difference somehow, and getting them to think."
Yes.
I think that is so important because so many people have lost that skill, obviously, in the last few years. But it's really important to have knowledge, acquire knowledge, never stop acquiring
Never
knowledge.
stop.
Do it till the moment you take your last breath. And then also think about it all. Look outside and say, I wonder why that bug is doing that.
Mhm.
Right.
I wonder why that bird does that. And there's all kinds of things that are magic that people don't know are magic.
Right. Why do you think? Why do you suppose some people have that type of way of thinking where they want to know why the hummingbird behaves the way he behaves, and then other people are just whatever, they're focused on something else? Maybe it's just the spectrum of the human experience. I don't know.
I think it's that. I think that's part of it. It's a lot of it. I hate to say it, but I think there's a lot of people that are happier being ignorant because being
Mhm.
ignorant means you don't have to address some things that are uncomfortable. You can
Mhm.
blissfully go along and vote for this person or do that or do this, and you don't have to worry about all that stuff because you're not a thinker.
I wish I could do that. I really do. Sometimes when I meet people like that, I'm like, I want to not worry about any of this stuff. But at the same time, some of my best moments in life have been like, whoa, like figuring out a truth that I didn't realize. And
That's right.
that started when I was very young. I want to know, you mentioned your first experience, like not out of body, but past life experience was around 10. Could you walk us through that a little? Like what that was like, the experience?
Well, it's kind of weird because a lot of things I've thought about. Uh, the past life thing is very strange because it doesn't. I think you have dreams and things, especially when or what you think are dreams. I'm not sure the dream experience is what everybody thinks it is.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to think that some of it really is your brain just processing what you did that day
Sure, sure.
or an experience you had. But there's other dreams that are just too vivid, too uh, lucid.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You could tell something was different about it.
Yeah, so I was always a very lucid dreamer. And like I'll give you an example. When I was about 15 or 16, I had this very lucid dream, and I dreamed that the Earth was in trouble. Now they didn't know the stuff they know now, but I saw it was being destroyed. And in the dream, I was taken up into a spaceship, and I was looking at this porthole at the Earth burning. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad that I got off. I'm so glad I'm safe. And then I thought, oh my God, everything I know and love is being destroyed. Now, what's weird is when that movie Knowing came out,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you saw it,
I
but
did, yeah.
there was a poster that they had for that showed a little boy looking out of a porthole at things burning. And I swear that's exactly what I saw. And I was wondering, so was I having a dream of the earth really being destroyed? Or was I having a dream about a movie that I was going to be seeing like in the next 40 years? It was just so strange.
Either way, it's a wrinkle in time. It's
Oh my God!
Fast
Guilt,
forward in
please
vision.
put on that book.
Yeah.
Because I read that when I was 10, and that I will tell you this: that is the one thing that flipped me.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That book. I've got a copy of it on my bookshelf even now. I read that book every once in a while just to read it, even though it's a kid's book. But I can tell you, when I was 10, when I read that, it was like a different world opened for me. I don't know what she did in the way she wrote that book,
Mhm.
but, and I'll tell you this, when she talks about the Tesseract, and for people that haven't read the book, the Tesseract is kind of a portal that takes you someplace else, to another time, another place, whatever. But if you really read the book, you find out. I mean, no, she didn't know it then. They didn't even have that word then. But what that tesseract was a wormhole.
Hmm.
That's what I mean. If you really go back and read the book and see where they enter the tesseract and come out of the tesseract and all that, it's a wormhole. And so she was ahead of her time on that. The book is like Madeline Engel had written a children's book that had these overtones of a really bright girl in the book. That the character of Meg is a super smart girl, right? And so I really related to that character because nobody else was writing books about super smart girls at that time, but she did. And so that book and what they went through and the adventures they had, it just, I don't know what it did, but it opened up my consciousness. I can tell you that was the thing that did it. That was kind of like watching the monks make the mandala moon. Well, with reading her book, I was like, oh, I was a sci-fi geek from then going forward. I was that girl in high school that I had already read all of Ray Bradbury. I had already read Ursula K. Le Guin and all these people, and I still have a shelf full of science fiction. So I've got that mindset too. You know, science fiction, paranormal, UFOs, everywhere.
And we bounce between all those topics on our show, of course. But like you were saying earlier, we're not really trying to beat people over the head with anything. We find all this stuff interesting. We think it's fascinating to speak with knowledgeable folks like you. We want to share this with as many people as we can. And if you do ever write a book one day, I'm sure it will be excellent. I think you could do it. I think you got one. But until then, just having these chats is a great way to get the message out there.
Yeah, I want to get, that's the main message I want to get out is explore. Let this do your exploring for you. If you're confined, like COVID taught us that we were going to be confined, you know?
Not this. Don't let this. No. Throw this away.
Read books.
Read books. I've got books out there, books there. I've got a stack of books there. I've got a stack on my desk. So I'm an avid reader of everything. I also read the newspaper, but it's just with me, it's like learn as much as you can about everything, including people. Don't be afraid because of where they live or how they live. Learn about that because it's part of human experience and it's how you gain an understanding of humans.
Right. That's sort of the basis of our show too, is we want to hear from everyone and hear like all different, sides of the story. And we don't want to like limit anyone's experience and tell them, hey, their experience isn't as valid as someone else's. I wanted to ask about the book, The Wrinkle in Time. I read it when I was a kid too, and I'm trying to remember the themes, but like some of the themes were like they're very like the importance of science as well as the accepting yourself and like that seems
there's a good versus evil thing in that book too.
Yeah, so there's a lot of deep themes for a kid's book. What was it about the book? Was there like a certain moment, a certain chapter, a certain feeling you got that was like, this is it, this changes everything?
I can't remember any particular thing in the book, but I do remember that when I picked it up and read it, and then when it first starts out, it talk about Meg and her little brother and all that. It was about Meg because she showed me that being smart wasn't bad. She showed me that she could have friends and even a boyfriend or whatever, and live her life, take care of her little brother, and share the magic with them all, and still come home.
And that's kind of what you've been doing
exactly
your life.
You navigated all those paths.
Yeah, I mean, I'm checking all the boxes. It's hard to do, but it can be done. And it's been real interesting that I know several years ago, Jeremy Vanny talked to me too. I don't know if you've ever heard Jeremy Vaney, but
Mm-mm.
it really helped me to verbalize these things that I never, because he even asked me a little thing that I noticed when I talked to him, and also when I was with Paul's group,
Mhm.
that several of us had childhoods with more than the regular amount of illness.
Mhm.
Paul's group and I remember there were several people that had certain brain things happen.
Mhm.
And also when I talked to Jeremy, he says, well, wonder if that's kind of if there's something that happens when you're a child, especially if you have a certain kind of illnesses or whatever, that turns things on.
Mhm. Could be stressful or traumatic at a time when you're still developing.
Yeah, I think that could happen because, like in my case, I was a very sick little girl. I mean, they put me in the hospital. They filled me full of all kinds of shots and all that kind of stuff. It was very traumatic. And at the same time, in those days, they didn't have a children's ward of the hospital I was in. And on top of that, my parents lived 40 miles away, and they couldn't afford to send them a hotel or whatever to be with me. So every night at the hospital, I was by myself.
Mm.
And so I had to learn. It was very scary, but it also, and at some level, it helped me. I mean, I got past it,
Yep.
and I became a healthier physically person because of it. But I think it also made me see that this makes a difference. And I know that I just think it was important. And I don't want I don't want kids to go through what I went through, but we do know that some of us have had certain experiences as a child that clicked that thing on, whatever it was. And if you have a kind of childhood where everything is happy and
Right.
everything goes well, maybe that thing doesn't kick on or get turned on like it should.
Mm.
That's one of the things that Dave and I try to be respectful about as we have these discussions regarding consciousness. A lot of those interesting discussions are sort of predicated on some early traumatic experience that brings all this stuff out. And while we're curious, we don't wish for that for anybody or for ourselves. You didn't have a near-death experience per se, but spending the night in the hospital all alone as a little kid, that's pretty traumatic for a little child's development.
And so it makes you see, I feel sorry for these people right now in our country that have really had it pretty good for a long time. And their lives have, compared to like people in other parts of the world, like in Africa, say, certain countries in Africa, people here cannot relate to that at all.
No.
They don't know what it's like to have to like during my mother's life as a child, she grew up during the Depression. So they had some serious stuff going on.
Yes.
And so a lot of these younger people today are people that have had really, really excellent lives, plenty to eat, plenty to do. They were a part of a certain group as a kid and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
What happens to them when things go south?
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to deal with it? Are they going to buck up and say, I can get through this. I will do what I need to do to survive, to help my family survive? Can they do that?
Even help a community survive?
Help a community survive.
Yeah, because in times like that, everyone's has to contribute to make the community survive, not just the family. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting. You're right to see, like, knock on wood, hopefully nothing like knocks the grid off or something. But honestly, it's just a matter of time. We live in a cosmic shooting gallery. There's a giant star that shoots plasma at us occasionally.
Our own star could do that. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
They talk about EMPs that happen from an atomic bomb, but you can get an EMP from the sun, and
worse one.
It can put us back in the Stone Age.
Yeah.
In no time flat.
Yeah, I think maybe that's society's kind of underlying obsession with like end of the world, zombie apocalypse type movies and shows, because it's a reality that like you can, I guess you can indulge in like a theater form, but you're in your recliner, right? And you got your
Having your
soda.
beer.
Yeah, exactly. But I think deep down, most of us know that like this could all get turned off in a second. I don't want to be jumping around too much, but I really do want to hear about past experiences in Egypt, just because I really got into that lady Seti. Are you familiar with Seti?
Oh, yes, I've read that book.
Yeah, I watched a
That's
documentary
great.
about her. I didn't actually read a book, but like I was like really obsessed with that like idea for a while, and I was wondering if you could share some of your experiences. And were they similar to the Buddhist monk one? Were they longer? What happened?
They were different. I mean, I remember several lives there. One that I remember particularly well. I remembered I remember being a little girl, and my parents during that life in Egypt, or they're my grandparents now. They were my grandparents in this life, but they were my parents in that life. And as a little girl, I remember baking bread with my mother, flatbread and all that. And I remember somehow I ended up being basically a courtesan for the pharaoh. But I was more than a courtesan. I was like an advisor / courtesan.
Yep.
Because I had information that helped him. I don't remember who the pharaoh was. I really don't. I don't remember his name or anything. And I do know that over my past lives, a certain name for me has kind of come and gone and had different iterations, like sunflower, flower of the sun. I mean, depending on what life it was and what country, it would be some iteration of that.
Interesting.
I don't know how I became Darlene and Cosmic Librarian, but that particular life I remember very well, and in that life I even remember how I died, because not only was I a courtesan to the king, I had boyfriends on the side, right? So there was one particular general in his army that I was affiliated with, and I lost his child, but I also died. He killed me. I remember that pretty well. And so I was going to tell you something else about Egypt. It just fled through, and then I lost it. But it had to do with Egypt too, and past life memories, and now. So, but I can't. Like I said, I just lost it.
Happens to me all the time.
Right.
Oh, I hate that. You get to be my age, and it happens more often than not.
I've been thinking lately, we need to go ahead and call memory for what it is. It's one of our senses. There's more than 5. People talk about a 6th or a 7th or a 12th, but like memory is definitely one of them, because it's just like vision or hearing. You can have varying levels of acuity. You can lose your memory. You can have excellent memory, photographic memory, or like most of us, somewhere in between.
Well, there was a study done on infants and their memory. And basically, I think it ended up concluding that they're so new to the world, they haven't learned how to remember yet, because they don't have the experiences. It's kind of like, I saw this just the other day. I thought it was really fascinating, because I've always wondered about that. There's a few people that remember their infancy, like Whitley Strieber had a memory of when he was still in the crib and his mother. And he says it was a very real memory. So, and then certain things that help memory are things like sense of smell. If you ever smelled, like my grandmother's berry pie, there's something about that odor of berry pie that takes you right back. You know, so
Mm-hmm.
there's different things that trigger memories for people in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But little babies haven't learned those triggers yet because they don't have any memories yet. And as for
Right.
their other life memories, the best way to describe it is, well, if you remember a past life, how come you don't remember when you were a baby? How come?
Right.
And I'm like, well, that baby starts brand new.
Mm-hmm.
And that soul is still the same soul, but it's brand new for this time around.
Yeah.
So, but there are some of us that are not quite as new as the others.
Right.
We're a little bit older. And so certain things come to us, like to me, like my partners even said, you must be a very old soul. And, you know, that, so the more experience you have, the more you start to understand things. And I think right now we are in a period with, what is it, 8-9 billion people on this planet?
As
Are
far
they
as
all?
they say, yeah.
Yeah. Are they? Are
Who
every
knows?
one of them an old soul, or how many are there new souls? You know,
Right.
nobody knows.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gets real interesting because just because you're a king doesn't mean you're an old soul. It just means you got lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So maybe that really good old soul is somebody that's just an average person. My experience with people has been some of the wisest people I know are not anybody knows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I've met a lot of people that no one knows that they're wise or beyond their years or beyond their experience even. And there's no necessarily reason for it. You know, it's not like they lived a life full of enriched experience or anything. They just understand. And sometimes it's just about understanding just how to be a human without struggling, you know, like without
Yeah.
trying to fight every second of being a
Oh
human.
yeah,
It's
I had
just,
to learn that lesson myself because as a kid, I would. Oh man, I had the worst temper when I was a kid. I mean, I was one of those that I'd take my teddy bear and throw it. You know.
Mhm.
So I got past that, and I don't know what the source of that anger was. I suspect it might have been something going on in my family that didn't even register here anymore. But there's different strokes for different folks, I guess is the best way to put it.
Mhm.
It's a very, what's that painting that Darlene did, the persistence of memory
Mhm.
and of the melting clock and all that. I've always loved that word because I'm like, that's really the way it is like, you know. And do some people choose not to remember?
Right.
Maybe. Yeah. It might also. Sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
I was gonna just ask. Sometimes we get like, let's say, a false dichotomy between material determinism and then sort of spiritualism. Do you think there's still a role for determinism to play in that if the right neurons and synapses are not forming and connecting, then the poor little kid is not going to form the memories and have that memory sense? There's still some element to play with that. Like you need to be healthy and nurtured for the body to grow and the brain to grow.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's still about experience. So there's, Lord knows how many children might be born geniuses like Albert Einstein, but because they grew up in the worst jungle ever, and they come from a society that is still
Developing.
developing. Maybe they're still very primitive. So maybe that child is a genius, but with him or her, it's going to be about survival.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that child will have a genius way of surviving.
Right.
Maybe that child will develop something new that the village never had before to make life easier.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a type of genius that is not acknowledged by the world, but the people in that group may know.
That's a great point.
It is. Mike was actually saying the same thing I was going to say, just in a different way, which with, you know, just in reference to like myself. And I think about my childhood. I grew up around a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, a lot of bad people, not bad people, but like people who are having a hard time. And so it makes and the first thing I thought of was like, I wonder how much attention I would have been able to pay to, extrasensory experiences, for lack of a better word, when like, you're worried about getting proper nutrition or not getting your butt kicked on the way to and from school and stuff like that. And so, yeah, that's interesting. I think it's everything, right? It's whatever level you're on in the like continuum of lives, but it's also what life were you born into? Were you born into luxury? Were you born into like a fundamentalist church, like you had mentioned, where maybe the way you think is very is very controlled or attempted to be controlled and that kind of thing, and
everything's bad. Don't dance. Don't do this. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Like I was somewhat rebellious. So I'm like,
Mhm.
so I remember arguing with my Sunday school teachers.
Mhm.
I mean, I remember one Sunday school teacher, I think I was about 12, 13, and he asked me to leave his class to go into an older class because he couldn't deal with my questions.
I was also kicked out of Sunday school. Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah.
I didn't get kicked out, but I just volunteered. I told my parents, I said, I want to go to big church. That's what I got. I want to go to the big church, the grown-up church.
No, I know, because like with me, I remember that one teacher, the church I grew up in basically believed that if you didn't believe in Jesus Christ and you weren't baptized, that was it.
Mm.
And I said, wait a minute, are you telling me that people that live real far away in Africa or wherever that have never heard of Jesus and will never hear of Jesus, that God is going to condemn them?
Right.
And he was like, well, that's why we got to get out and preach. I said, no. Are you telling me
Right.
that he is condemning them? And he couldn't answer that question. And that's when he asked me to go to another class, because that was a question that I guess he had never thought of. But at the same time, I was like, no, if the God is the God you say is a loving God, he wouldn't do that.
Right.
It must be a rough gig, though, to be a Sunday school teacher, because probably once a year you get a cosmic librarian in your class who's like 6, and she's like, hey, what about this? And you're like, I never thought about that. And so I just wanted to shout out the Sunday school teachers out there trying their best. But I it's a boxed in way of thinking, and I like how you've instead created a lifelong journey of learning and experiencing. You said you called yourself an experiencer. Is that in relation to the past memories and the psychic events, for lack of a better word, or are we talking more UAPs?
It's all that, and I've also had, like I told you how I studied UAPs and UFOs back, way back. But I never really had experiences until maybe, I guess it's probably been about 35 years ago. One night, now this is where we're going to get into some weird stuff, because
this
is where I started putting pieces together and started realizing, are these aliens or are they me?
Bring it on. Let's go.
So one night when I was married, my husband and I had this really bad argument, and the lights were out and everything, and he was still steamed, and I was just laying there, and I thought, you know what, if he doesn't shut up soon, I'm going to get up and leave. And then all of a sudden, the room filled with red light. I mean, it was like, and we were second story. We were in a second story bedroom, and we had a big, huge window, and we had the shade drawn. But even with the shade drawn, that room was so bright red that it was like a police light, only it was inside the room and coming from outside, right outside the window. And I remember, I said, what the heck is that? And my husband, he says, I don't know what that is. And he got up and he went over to the window, he looked out the blind, and he shut the blind, and then he ran out of the room. And I'm sitting there and the light's still there, right? And I'm like steamed that the light showed up. I'm mad. And so after about 3 or 4 minutes, he comes, he said he's going to go check on her son, right? Well, he comes right back, gets in the bed and goes right to sleep. And I'm laying there like, what just happened? And so the next morning, I tried to get him to talk about it, and he wouldn't. He would not talk about it. So I'm not sure if that was a UFO outside there or if that was something that I did. If I didn't somehow change things and stop the argument, that red light. And so I have had some other experiences where when I go back and think about them, I always try to think, what was I thinking in that moment? What was going on? And I'm starting to feel that some of the stuff that has happened to me, including time slips, are things that maybe I did not being aware of it. Another one is like, one day it was when I worked for the health department, and I had to go around the whole county and visit my medical providers and speak to them and all this kind of stuff. So I had been driving around all afternoon. It was a hot day here in Texas, and I just wanted to get home, right? So I went to the last office I need to visit, and I'm on the way home, right? And I come to this major intersection in Austin, and I see this fire truck go by, and it's crossing. I'm going towards it, and it's going that way, right? And I see that fire truck, and so I make a left turn on the same road. And it's rush hour. It's like around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which rush hour starts pretty early here. And it's right in front of a big mall, shopping centers, everything. So it's a really busy place. So I'm driving along and I'm not seeing anybody, right? I get up to this intersection, and in the middle of the intersection is a big black SUV that's been wrecked. It's got fluids coming out of it. There's a EMS vehicle there and the ambulance and all that. And I'm like, I just want to get home, right? So he's blocking the intersection. I said, I just want to get home. I don't want to be sitting here all day. But in hindsight, I remembered I saw no one. Just the accident. There were no people standing around. It was just the vehicle sitting there with the fluid coming out and all that. But when I got there, see, there was I was the only person there, so I made a right turn, and there was like a little turnaround. It took maybe 2 minutes from the time you made that right turn, go up to the turnaround and come up the other way, and then I was going to go out that way, right? So I got it, so I would bypass the accident. Okay, so I make that turn, I do the U-turn, and I come back to the intersection. This all happens in maybe 2 minutes, maybe less.
Mm-hmm.
There is nothing in that intersection. Nothing.
Wow.
I even looked on the ground to see if there were any fluids on the ground from the vehicle that had been wrecked.
Yep.
Nothing. I'm going like,
Yep.
oh. And so I went ahead and went home, and I saw that fire truck way up there ahead of me, the one that I'd seen earlier. And I'm like, I was so confused. And
did you check the local news or newspapers?
There was no accident anywhere. It was gone. It was not there. And so when I went back and remembered everything, just like the incident with the red light, I remembered it. I had a very strong desire to get around that intersection. However I had to do it. I think I switched a timeline or something, and I think I made it happen. I think I made it happen. I didn't consciously think, make this go away. I was just like, I want to get home. I don't want to mess with this accident.
The intention was there, even if you weren't saying it consciously in a sentence. The intention was underlined.
Exactly. And that accident, it was one of the weirdest things I have ever experienced in my life. I mean, I've had lots of weirdness and lots of things happen, but that was like, I was telling my partner the next day about it. I said, this was so weird. And what was interesting is I think where this accident occurred, we were on the regular road, but there were several flyovers overhead. And I have wondered, because my partner says he had something weird happen near that same place.
Some Bermuda highway.
Yeah, I wonder if some kind of resonance or something, because of the way it was constructed. That maybe for regular people it wouldn't do anything, but for people like me or like him, it was like, So that was an example, I think, and along with the red light, I think I had something to do with it. And I would encourage people that have really strange experiences, whether it's UFOs or whatever, to examine what was going on in there, what they were thinking in that moment, because I had another UFO experience. Well, I've had two others. And that one, we had gone to visit my aunt in a little community south of here, and it was Christmas Eve, and we just walked out of her house, and it was kind of rural where she was, a real pretty night. It was Christmas Eve. It was really clear, beautiful night. And I remember as I was going out that front door, and I don't know why I thought this, but I thought, gee, what a beautiful night to see a UFO. Why did I think that? Okay, so we got in the car and we're coming back. We're down this country road. And I noticed these three lights. At first, I didn't say anything because I thought I was saying things. There was this long, when I first came to the intersection before we turned onto the road, I saw just like a Christmas card that you see of the Star of Bethlehem. It's big, bright, it's got tails coming down and everything. It looked just like that. I was rolling my eyes. Oh, no, I must be crazy. So then we turned up that road, and then I kept seeing three lights, like it was a triangle. And I kept seeing it follow us. And when we got up to the main highway, which was even about 15 or 20 miles down the road, I noticed it was on the right side, and it would look like one light. And as you got closer to it, it became three. And I even watched out of the corner of my eye to see, was it going behind me? And I saw this for miles. And I didn't say a word because it was crazy, And so all of a sudden from the back seat, my younger son goes, Mom, have you been watching those lights that are following us? You see it too? He goes, yes. And so all the way from that town to our house, that thing followed us up. It's a big road called, I won't say where it was, but it follows, it would appear as one light. And as you got closer to it, it would become three, and you'd watch it go back, right? When you went past it. So it was stationary. So you could watch it and you could see it. And then as soon as you turned your head around, there was that one light again and became three. That was all the way from that town to just before we got home. And then just before we got home, we came to another big intersection. There wasn't a lot of traffic that time of night. It was Christmas Eve. And this big light was like right over the intersection, just no taller than that tree right there. You could not miss it. And the whole way, my son and I were trying to get my husband to pay attention to it, and he wasn't doing it. He wasn't seeing it. He wasn't acknowledging it at all. And I said, "Don't you see it?" And when we saw it was right over, I said, "Can't you see it's right over the intersection?" We stopped at the stoplight. I said, "It's right there." He says, "I'm just driving. I'm not paying it. I can't pay attention to that. I got to keep driving." And then all the rest of the way home, it was the same thing. One light, three lights, one light, three light, all the way until we got home.
Huh. Yeah, that's one of those things like where we mentioned earlier, some people are like blissfully unaware. Like they're choosing not to see. It sounds like maybe he was choosing not to see.
He was choosing not to see.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned like you change timelines or whatever. So that's not, to me, that doesn't sound like super paranormal, right? If I wanted to like toss my computer up in the air and say, "I hate this, I'm out of here," I just entered a new timeline. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right. Every decision.
Yeah.
We in new timelines every time it's every thought, every action has consequence.
mhm.
And whether you verbalize it or not, you change something. If you
Yes.
wait a minute, what is that? Or why did this happen? Or why did I do that? Or whatever. Everything affects what happens to you. But then there comes a time where what you do affects those around you.
Right.
And maybe even the whole timeline that these other people were in.
Right.
And likewise, they could be doing it too.
Exactly. And, with you saying, you've certain UAP experiences, when you think back, it's possible that you caused them or whatever. Or you were the cause. You're the one who summoned it, or for lack of a better word. Have you following like modern UFO disclosure and what they're talking about with like psionics and how psychic abilities are being used to contact these things? And,
Yep.
and is that validating for you in any way?
Well, it is. Let me tell you about one more time.
Yeah.
I was at home. I just gotten up and it was still dark outside. It was like 6 a.m. or something. The sun hadn't come up. And I was home by myself that day. And I went out to get the newspaper, right?
Mhm.
And it's dark outside. And I go get the newspaper off the driveway and I look up in the sky. It's just beautiful. Orion's up in the sky. It's gorgeous. And I'm just thinking, there's a part of me, I said, kind of mentally, I said, "Thank you for this beautiful morning." And then all of a sudden, there was this perfectly round ball of light. And it was in the kind of the torso of Orion. And it was kind of bouncing around in there.
Like a leaf falling.
It was letting me know that positive thought that I put out there about, "Thank you for this. I love this beautiful morning." I mean, I felt really good in that moment. And in that moment, I saw that little round ball of light. And I was like, and I said, "Thank you. Thank you for that." And I felt so good after that. Whatever that was or whatever I did made a difference. That was a very positive thing in that moment. And I don't know if it was consciousness, a UFO, or just something in me that said kudos to you for appreciating this beauty in this moment.
Yeah.
But it was real. It was perfectly round. It was bouncing around just like a little ping pong ball inside that torso. I couldn't miss it.
So what do you think then about like modern UFO disclosure? I mean, obviously that's validating for you, but I go back and forth between like, is this some kind of psyop? Is the government lying to us again? Versus like, or is this real? Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Boy, my thoughts on that. Let me tell you, I've read, I remember I listened to the Grush hearings that day live.
We did too.
And I also saw that James Clapper was back there. And I'm like, what's he doing there? Some people, I looked at everybody in the audience behind him and I was like, what's really going on here? and George Knapp, and some other people, and then Louis Elizondo wrote his book, and I was familiar with him even before all of that because I used to be with one of Grant Cameron's groups. He used to have what he called rabbit hole meetings where we just all get around and talk about stuff that's going on in heaven, dust, and all that. And I remember that back then he was talking to Lou Elizondo. So I think one of the things that had really bothers me with what's going on right now, I don't think that the government or the military should be involved in it because it's another way to manipulate people and use people.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that Lou Elizondo is that way, but like I know a lot of people want disclosure right now. I'm like, okay, so knowing what's going on in our country right now, and some of the weird stuff that's going on and the questionable stuff, you want that person to make the announcement? I have to think about it because I don't think disclosure should, like I said, I don't like the government, and especially the military, being involved in it because I do know that there's psyops. I do know that back in the 50s and 60s, there was some stuff going on with UFOs that were kind of like psychological experiments, for lack of a better term.
Yes. Yes.
And I do know that the government has experimented on people unbeknownst to them.
MK Ultra, yeah.
Yeah. So we know, so I'm kind of on the fence on it. I would love to have anything confirmed.
Sure.
But at the same time, 10 years ago, I said, yes, bring it on. But now I'm like, I don't know.
Yep. We haven't been trusting. These people haven't been trustworthy for many decades.
They were lying to us all those years ago, and they've been lying ever since. Why should I believe anything they say now?
Well, right. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. And I'm going to get I'm going to use a professional wrestling, like WWE analogy for this. But there's two types of people in the audience at an event like that. The people who know it's real and are just there for fun. And then the people who are believing the story, hook, line, and sinker. Those people are what's called the mark, okay? When Hulk Hogan turns bad one day and hits the other good guy with a chair and everyone's like, oh no, right? I'm scared. I'm worried that those people are called the mark in pro wrestling.
There's a lot of them right now.
I'm what's called the mark. Look, I literally behind me. I want all this stuff to be real, Darlene. So I'm paranoid that I'm the mark, and so as they drip this stuff out, I'm going, oh, here we go, more and more and more. But is this some kind of psyop to get me to follow along with a certain agenda? I don't know. It seems like everything's a psyop these days, so I don't even know.
It's kind of weird. We're talking about this. There's a thing that happens once a year at Rice University called Archives of the Impossible. Are you familiar with it?
No, but I'm going to look it up and check it out.
It's really fantastic, and they have real scientists there. Jeffrey Kripal is, he's of religious studies at Rice, and it started about 3 years ago. And I have attended virtually every year, and they're going to have another one in April.
And next two weeks.
Yeah, it's very close. And I would recommend that. It's too late probably for most people to be involved with it, but for this year. But I would advise finding a way to get on their mailing list because it lasts usually about 2.5 days. They have really knowledgeable speakers about everything from UFOs to psi abilities, and it's real scientists doing real work. And they had Ray Hernandez last year. I don't know if you've read his books, but this is the latest one, I guess. A Greater Reality. It's on my desk. It's a big, big book now. He's written and collected a lot of stories, but he was at Archives of the Impossible, I think, last year. But the first year, Jacques Vallée was there. But I mean, I do think there's some science that we need to know about, but I also know there's another aspect to it that I don't think we're quite ready yet for.
Yeah, I let me see if I know where you're going with that. Like we're sort of socially, as social creatures, we're sort of in our adolescence, right?
Right.
And we're still like, having growing pains. So this information, part of me goes, if I was a government and I found out that everything was like not as it seems, would I share it with everyone all at once? I don't know. Are we ready?
In a perfect world, we'd like to think that the world could, because all of people, oh, the world can deal with it. Like Linda Moulton Howe says that. Oh,
Yeah.
we're ready for that. I'm like, no, we're not. All you can do is just look at the world and know that, it'd be people that are non-believers, believers, religious people. It's going to affect everything so big.
Yes,
Richard Dolan has written about this. He knows what he's talking about. Is that it would be such a paradigm shift that I think some people would actually go a little nuts. And you see these sci-fi shows where it happens, and I think those are probably closer in some ways than what we think in real life would happen. But I do know that people would take it and run with it, and everybody be running in different directions with it.
Oh yeah,
and it would be chaotic, and there'd be a few people like y'all, people like me, people like John Valet, that would be okay. We'd be dealing with it because we've kind of prepared our own psyches for this idea. But most people have not done that. I think some native people, indigenous people will deal with it better than.
Oh yeah, they're far beyond. They're actually way more prepared than modern society and civilization.
Exactly. I mean, like if you know anything about the Lakota and the Navajo and some of those people, they've got some belief systems that I don't even want to call them belief systems. I think that because they are so ingrained in nature, their take on it is totally different. Like ant people. Okay, what does an ant person look like to you? It looks a lot like a gray. And I'm not even sure I believe in grays. I'm leaving it all open right now because I know it could be totally unexpected or something that I hadn't even thought of or you hadn't even thought of. So
yeah, and I think leaving it open is the idea, right? Like, because as a human, none of us, like even the smartest ones alive, really we're just humans. Not that that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that as like we're just humans, but like we only have a certain capacity to understand this stuff. And I always, every time a human tells me, "Oh, I've got all the answers," I always like go, oh, "Okay, sure."
Well,
sure
I just back off automatically. Anybody says that.
Yeah, well,
eliminate that.
And that's why you have to be knowledgeable about so many things. I mean, and try to learn about as much as you can and have curiosity to follow what that means. I mean, we have an excellent system to do it if you know what you're doing, and that's the internet. I mean, it's like the encyclopedia of everything.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But you've got to know how to use it. And I know how to use it. And people that know me, I'm like, how do you find out? I'm like, I know the magic words. And I get where to go. I know how to say that. But I study the science. I keep abreast of what's going on, though I can't keep up with all of it. But I know exactly what's going on a spiritual or a scientific level, if not on a human level. The human level is the weird one. That's the wild card.
It is.
Yeah.
That is the wild card, is being human, because we're emotional beings. We're physical beings, and sometimes we can't control our physicality because you know yourself, if you've ever really been frightened, I mean, really frightened, your whole body just tells you.
Yeah.
Psychologically, you may not realize how scared you are, but your body tells you. And so you've got to be dealing with that too. And I really like that guy. Well, do you? And why do you? Most people don't even answer that. Well, I just think he's a great guy. Well, why is he a great guy? Well, I don't know. I just really like him. I mean, so that's what you're dealing with. And it's, I don't want to get into politics and but people have, or I tell you what people like is discernment. Discernment is what is missing from so many people. And part of discernment is learning as much as you can, knowing as much. I don't think they teach a lot of science in schools anymore. And I don't think that kids learn as much of the basic, what is gravity? What is, I don't think they learn the basics. And I've got books about quantum physics too, which is really off the wall. But it's the physics of the world unseen, really.
Yeah, you had mentioned Richard Feynman earlier and seen him speak in person. To piggyback on your quantum physics thing, what was that like seeing like a guy like him speak in person?
Oh my gosh! When I was in high school, like I said, I was a really smart kid, and I was in a class full of seniors that year. I was in science, and I was like a sophomore, and I had a really good science teacher that year, and he sent me to as many things as he could, and one of them was a whole weekend on Catalina Island, and it was about marine biology and the environment and all that, and it was it was really bad. I got to be away from home. Catalina Island is very small community of people there, so we stayed in the home of students that went to school there, and I remember the speakers were amazing, but on our last day there, we went around to the other side of the island to a research facility, a little tiny room that wasn't much bigger than this room I'm in right now. There was a few little rows of seats, and somebody was telling us what they did there at the research facility. And all of a sudden the door opened and Jacques Cousteau walked in.
Wow.
He had that hat on, and he was a little tiny man, very, very small, very tiny. And he probably wasn't even 5'2" or 5'3". And he came and stood right in front of me. I was sitting there. I was like, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven or something. But he just came in that really thick French accent of his and told us, I just heard that he was doing a special, he did those Jacques Cousteau specials. You're too young to remember, but he did them occasionally. They appeared on TV. And the whales were migrating at that time, and he was filming them, but he heard about us, and he made a special trip to Catalina, came in there, spent maybe 5 minutes telling us how happy he was that we were learning, to keep learning. He was very proud of us, and he just wanted us to know that he cared. And that just blew me away. I mean, I was like, I went back to school and nobody could relate to it. Nobody. And so when I got to see Richard Feynman, I'd been sent to a 2-day symposium in LA, and there were lots of great people. But when he got up to speak, I didn't even realize, so 16, right? I knew he was a very famous physicist. I was kind of vaguely aware of who he was. And so I wasn't really aware of, I knew he was a Nobel Prize winner and all that, but I didn't really quite grok who he was. And he got to give his speech. And this is the honest goodness truth. I'm a 16-year-old girl. He's old enough to be my grandfather, right? And he had this twinkle in his eye, and I just fell in love with that man. I was like, wow. And that's the kind of, I don't think they, if you've read about him, and I've got quite a few of his books, And he was the one that figured out the Challenger disaster, that it was an O-ring. He was the one that came up with that.
Mhm,
And so
mhm.
when I got to be an adult, I was like, oh yeah, I've heard that guy speak. But it was just like, it was really kind of magical for me. I mean, I understood who he was. I don't know how else to say it, but there was a part of me that really knew. And like I said, I fell in love with him. I was, can I go out with him someday? Because he was a very charming man. He knew how to talk. This was what was really strange. He could take a room full of high school kids and talk to them, make them feel like adults, and make it totally understandable to you. At the same time, he was very charming.
Mhm.
And I don't know how else to put it. He was just like, he was just very different. And then when I got older, I read about him, and then I realized that I wasn't the only one that fell under his spell. That's the way he was. But it's really stayed with me. Him and Jacques Cousteau, the two of them, those brief moments are like, everybody is, oh, I went to see the Beatles, or I did this. I don't like, well, yeah, but I got to see Cousteau. I got to see Richard Feynman. So that's the kind of person I am, and I'm very grateful that I had those moments. They made a difference. I didn't become a scientist, didn't become a great writer. I studied theater, but those two stuck with me, and they're back here as a reminder that the science is important too.
Yes. I really enjoyed reading Richard Feynman's Surely Your
Yes,
Guilty
I've got that
biographical book. In my early 20s, when I was setting out into the world, it was just great to read and feel energized and feel enthusiastic.
Yeah, I recommend that book. It is a really good book. I mean, you get to he was a real human being. He was a funny guy. He was a jokester and a prankster, and he was a great mind and a great scientist. And somehow he learned how to balance those. And that's not an easy thing. I don't think Einstein ever got there. Totally different kind of mindset, but both were geniuses in their own way.
Right.
Yeah, they call that magnetism. Some people just can draw people in, especially if you're on a similar, I don't know, for lack of a better phrase, wavelength.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's about wavelength or brain wavelength.
Resonance.
It's a good place to be, and when you encounter that person or persons, and in the right circumstances, they can change your life. Just like Madeline Langle, and just like those two, they had a huge impact on me. Even though I didn't do anything great as a scientist or anything, they impacted the way I think.
Yeah, I think that's it's one of the most important parts about being a human is like making connections with people who you're on the same wavelength with, and they change how you think and how you see the world. And it sounds like that's what you're trying to do, or you've been doing for a long time. That's one of the things. It's almost shamanistic in a way. Like you're talking about how you come across people who you just in your day-to-day life, who you. Even if it's a small nugget, you get to give them something to think about, right?
It's one, I try to, I don't want to change people. I just want to make them think. And if it's one thing I say, or hey, did you read about blah, blah? Like whenever MH370 disappeared several years ago, I mean, I can't begin to tell you all the things that happened to me when that happened. And made connection to people I worked with. And they, to the point that they came to me, they knew me, but I hadn't talked about that with anybody, but they knew me, and they come to me and say, hey, Darlene, do you know what happened to MH370? So people already had a weird
Precognitive.
And a friend of mine, her husband, who's not psychic or anything, she said he had dreams about it, like before it happened, that he wanted to discuss with me.
Wow.
And I said, tell him to call me. Well, I never got to talk to him, but I'm telling you, there was something about that incident that drew people. And I don't know how to, I know that I read something recently that they think they might have figured out where it went down and all that, but They do this every few years,
Right.
but they never, and they even thought that they found parts of it at one time. But I'm telling you that what happened to me in those days after were
Yeah.
just bizarre. So, but there were other people, and they came to me and said, "Do you know what happened, Darlene?" And I'm like, "I don't know what happened, but I doubt if they're going to find." I told people, like the next day, I said, "If they find that plane, it'll be a miracle." I said, "I don't think they're going to find it. I don't think they're going to find where it went down." But now they're saying they think they know where it went down, but nobody's presented any evidence.
Are you aware of the video footage that's purportedly leaked from defense satellite systems that shows footage of that plane from above being surrounded by 3 orbs and then disappearing out of the
I
camera?
had heard about that. I haven't actually seen it, but
I don't have it prepared to bring up. I've watched it
yeah.
as well. It's
Yeah, I
compelling
would
footage.
like to see that because I'd heard about it, but that dovetails with what I saw.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because what was weird is I came home that day and my partner was on the sofa and he's watching the TV. And I go, "What are you watching?" He says, "Oh, this airplane just disappeared and they're trying to figure out where it went down." And it just it just happened that day. So it was still fresh. And I go, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, that's too bad." I didn't think much of it. The next morning I woke up and they said they still hadn't found it. So I just I did my thing to check in. And it was so bizarre. I saw all these people in a room that had no walls, but it had walls. I don't know how to explain it. And
Yeah.
because I fully expected to find dead people.
Yeah.
And they were pounding the walls, screaming, "Let us out of here, let us out." And
Yeah.
I came out of it like that. I thought, "Oh my God, they're not going to find that plane. They're not going to find that plane." And people asked me about it. I never said UFOs, but all I could tell them was, I just don't think they're going to find that plane. So I don't know what really happened, but I knew something weird happened with that plane. And this was the next day. There were weeks that went by, and I kept up with it every day. And but that thing just really it hung on me for a long time. And from what I saw with those people, they were terrified. They weren't dead. They were terrified, and they were caught somewhere where they couldn't get out. And that's all I saw, and that was enough for me. I don't know what it means. I don't know if I even, I tell people, I said, I can't trust my own mind and imagination sometimes.
Right.
So
I feel the
that's
same way.
Professional anything is because I don't quite trust what I'm seeing or experiencing, except the way it makes me feel. That scared me.
Yeah, if we can find that, track that video down at some point, we'll send it to you so that you can
Would you
check it out.
please? I'd really like to see it because I'm very curious because there was just something so weird about it, and I didn't think it was weird the day it happened. And the next day, when I thought, well, I'll just check in and tell them to go towards the light or whatever, But I was not expecting what I saw.
Yeah.
Walls, but no walls, trapped in the inside of some self-organizing ball of
It was
plasma.
weird because there were people on every wall, and even people facing me that were pounding on something. Something that I couldn't see, but they saw. So I don't know. It was just very strange, and I've had a very uneasy feeling about that one for a very long time now.
I would put that in the category of curious to see if disclosure happens, but I also don't trust the people that
I
are
don't
trying
trust
to
them at all. I
do
don't,
disclosure.
like I said, I don't think the government should be involved at all. I don't think the military should be involved at all. And what's bad is there are people like me and others that have had all kinds of experiences. They're not talking to them. It's got to come from the government. It's got to come from the military for people to believe it
Right.
or just or give it any credence at all. So that alone tells me it shouldn't be in under their purview. It needs to be in the hands of scientists, and more scientists are actually getting, like Dr. Gary Nolan and people like that, are actually starting to take this stuff seriously in a way, and they've documented changes in the brain, all kinds of stuff when people have experiences. So I feel better that those are the people I want really studying it. I want the Jacques Valets. I want the people that have been doing this for a long time to have lots of experience in science background, spiritual all kinds of backgrounds studying it, but not government or military.
Right. Yeah. Because they just control it, hide the secrets, use it to control us, all that stuff. And it's like use it to control narratives in the media, use it to control other countries. Like I totally agree with that.
Yeah, so that's where I differ with people that want disclosure, and that's not where I want it to come from. So, if a group of scientists got together tomorrow and they said, well, we've been studying this for years and we've been looking at this and looking at that, and we can confirm we have the evidence, the scientific evidence that this is real, that disclosure I would love.
Yeah.
Well, there's some inertia against that though, because remember the story of John Mack. He was ridiculed. He was put on trial basically by Harvard University for trying to publish legitimate scientific findings from his studies. So I think that's why I think there's a little bit of institutional inertia that's holding science back, even though science
I don't want to rock the boat
the
too much.
institutions. Right.
Yeah. Good. Speaking of rocking the boat, there's been some boat rocking going on in the historical context of ancient Egypt. Have you heard about the potential new discovery that come out recently? Under the Giza Plateau.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay, now we're going to get into some weird stuff.
Yes, please. Let's go.
Okay, so let me tell you how I got my moniker of Cosmic Librarian.
Well, that was my last question, so I don't want to end it. I'm just saying I was literally going to ask you that at the end, so let's do it now.
Okay, so I've been meditating really for several years, and I'm not a meditator that goes into this state and all that. I'm one of these people that it's not as bad now as it used to be, but I would meditate and it was like I was someplace else. I was living another life. It was like I just went someplace else. It was very strange, but that's why she's up there, because but I had this this vision, and in the vision, the god Thoth and the goddess Seshet. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but they want to take me under the pyramids and they want to show me something. They want to take me under the Sphinx and show me something. And in this vision, Seshet kind of takes my hand and grabs me and it's like running like crazy. She says, come on, I'll show you. And I'm like, what? and she says, I want to show you something. And she takes me into this room. It's enormous. It's like kind of went to infinity almost. It seemed that way to me. And it looked like a great library. That's what it looked like. And I'm not into Edgar Cayce and all that. I'm aware of it, but that's interesting, but no. Anyway, she turned to me and she says, this is a place for you. You can come here anytime you want and get the answers to your questions. And I was given the name of Cosmic Librarian that day. And so I was already having weirdness in my life. Well, it really started picking up around then. And so that's where I got that moniker from. Is I like to tell people, well, Sesha and folks gave me that name, and I don't know why, but they're finding things under the Sphinx and the pyramid now, and they're being cagey about it, because I know for years the Department of Antiquities and Zahi Hawass and that whole crew is like, they don't want anybody digging there. And so I don't doubt that there's something interesting and profound underneath there. It's as above, so below. If you know about that hermetic idea.
Yeah, well, the whole Egyptian culture was based on the idea of the underworld reflecting the overworld, and so it makes sense that there's something under there. It'll be interesting to see, because we're supposed to find out in another 7 to 10 days, more information. Actually, probably this week sometime. They're supposed to do another press conference. But it's funny that you mentioned that as the Cosmic Librarian, because there could very well be the wealth of universal knowledge underneath the pyramid, right?
Right. I mean, so there used to be a great library in Alexandria, which can you imagine if we had access to that now, if they hadn't burned it all down
or stole it?
Yeah. So, it's intrigued me for a while, and like everything I see, I kind of take a step back and go, what just happened?
Cautious skepticism. What's unique about the recent finding is this is satellite data, so they didn't have to ask permission from Zahi Hawass and the Department of Antiquities. Satellite data. So to me raises, well, what else are they spying on? They're trying to spy on under the ground.
But I do understand the Egyptians myself, and that these things are so, and even they don't really know how old those things are. They have estimates of how old the Sphinx is, and I've read about the Sphinx for years, and there's a really good book I have about it, that the Sphinx itself is not like it used to be. It's had different heads, and the weathering on that thing, like Jonathan West did a study on it along with Robert Schock about the weathering of the Sphinx, that it's much older. I mean, in other words, when it rains or something happens, dust blows around, the Sphinx has been buried several times.
They found it
by
buried.
The natural elements, and dug up again, and then buried, and dug up again. So it's incredibly old. So we don't really know how old it is. The pyramids we try to date, but I don't think we're real sure about those either. And they don't look anything like they used to. They used to have stones that are it was a brilliant, you could see it probably for miles, and it had a capstone of gold. So you can imagine how magnificent it must have looked when it was new. So and they used that material to build other things, like when people came in there. So and I know the Egyptians are trying to protect it. I went to an exhibit of King Tut's things here up in Dallas a few years ago, and the stuff that those people knew, and the arts, and what they were capable of, and I mean, it's really not just that civilization. There were others, but theirs was something a little different.
Yeah, I saw that King Tut thing here in Atlanta as well, and I've seen documentaries and stuff, but the replicas were incredible, and it really opened my eyes, like, because you can see it on TV, but when you see something like that in person, you're like, holy crap! Like they
Well,
did
the one
this
I went to
when?
actually had the real artifacts.
Oh, nice.
This was years ago, and the Egyptian Antiquities Department said, "Okay, we're going to let the U.S. have them for exhibits for a set period of time, and this is
Oh,
going
you're
to be
lucky.
it." So I actually got to see his chair
Mm.
and artifacts, and the most profound things to me weren't the beautiful art and all that. It was the personal things, like a lock of his grandmother's hair, and the babies that his wife had lost.
Mm.
They had all those babies mummified with him,
Wild.
and so he was a human being first and foremost. But the Egyptians were just. I've always wondered, about the shapes of their heads. They, they said, well, maybe they did binding, or they did this, or they did that. And like Tutankhamun, like his daughters, were portrayed with strange shaped heads. If you see the artwork, they go, well, it doesn't quite look like. So you've really got to wonder who these people were and who they were through time and how they changed, because they were taken over by Hyksos and the Greeks, and everybody else came in eventually. And we don't know how much more about their real antiquities are missing and what they are.
Yeah, I think we don't know. Like, I feel like humans don't know even a percentage of what we think we know. And so I was talking to a friend of mine about the recent discovery and what the implications of that yesterday. And, it struck me that, like, those pyramids have never really made sense. They've never really been plausibly explained, in my opinion, and in most people's opinions. So what makes sense to me is that there is something like that literally, the pyramids are literally the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what's there. And so this is actually not surprising to me at all that they find something massive underneath, because then it makes more sense than, like, just to have these giant mega structures that are perfect and have all these strange anomalies and technology that they couldn't have possibly known how to use. And
they could have been communication devices too, because I know that some people put forth the idea that they were connected to a network at one time. That were communication devices. But like in the Great Pyramid itself, there's an empty sarcophagus. But there's no evidence that anybody was ever put there. And on top of that, this is what's weird. And there are other tombs in Egypt. There's lots of paintings, and of the afterlife and of the pharaoh's life and all that. But there's not that much of anything painted on the walls in those pyramids.
No, there's modern graffiti, and that's about it. And so, yeah, I think it's just too much. It goes back to, are we ready to hear the truth or not, right? And I think that this is all related. The UAP stuff, the story of our past, and everything in between. And it's all related to me, and it's coming out slowly because of boosts in technology and raises in human vibration and consciousness. But there's a lot fighting back against it right now too.
Oh yeah, there's a lot fighting out against it. I mean, I remember it was about 30 years ago. I had read, whenever Whitley Strieber's book Communion came out, I think it was 85. And I remember reading that. I remember reading the paper that morning where they gave a review of the book, and I went right out that morning and bought that book. And I had read all of his fiction previous to that. I was familiar with him as a writer and the horror stories and all that. But I went and bought the book, and I read that book. And I remember telling someone, I said, I don't know what happened to him, but it was real and it really happened to him. But I don't know what it, and Whitley himself has never said aliens. Never. And so, but I also came to the realization after reading that book that everything like paranormal, UFOs, our abilities, ancient history, that all of that was connected somehow. I couldn't, actually come out and say how, but I'm like, they're all connected. It's all part of the same thing.
Yeah.
And that was 30 years ago. And I felt that way ever since. And then not long ago, I heard Whitley Strieber actually say that. And I went, well, thank you. Because I was already thinking that. I'd been thinking that for years. It's all this stuff is connected. So if you want to call it a thing flying around the sky, or if you want to call it a ghost or whatever, and I've had those experiences too. So, but I think it's really all part of the same thing. And I think because this is the other thing is a lot of people say to me, does this stuff scare you? I said, well, no, people scare me. This stuff.
Exactly. Exactly.
I have a question. I was remembering earlier a TV show called Early Edition, where the hero of the show gets tomorrow's paper today. That's the line of the show. And there's always something he needs to act on in order to prevent a disaster from happening. Have you ever had a little piece of information that you felt compelled to do something? Or is it always sort of don't mess with the timeline, don't mess with the continuum of events?
Yeah, there was a very big one back in 2015, 2016. And I warned people around me, and it was something I knew I couldn't do anything about. And a lot of that stuff that I saw in that moment is coming to fruition like right now. And I couldn't change it. Most of the things that happen, I mean, the little personal things, yeah, I can make a difference. But the big things like that was, and the consciousness of a whole world, and at that time in the United States of America, I saw this coming. I saw everything that's happening and unfolding right now coming. And I remember warning people. I mean, because when I saw it, when it hit me, all I'll say is there was a certain day that a certain someone came down a escalator. That's all I'm going to say. And in that moment, I was like, oh my God. And so I told people I knew. I told them, they just thought I was crazy. And they really thought I was crazy when I said he could win. Nobody believed me. Nobody believed me. And I do remember that morning when I came down the stairs and my partner looked at me and said, how did you know? So that was probably the biggie. I've had other things, but that was the only time I've had one that I went, oh my gosh, that scared me on a personal level, that made me, so I hope this doesn't you can delete this part of the thing out of you.
Well, thank you. And that was a tough question. I'm curious because the TV show always makes it very clear cut. It's rescuing people crossing the street or that type of thing, buildings burning down. But from a personal level, and then realizing what do I do with this information that I normally wouldn't have in this avatar, right? That becomes a very tricky existential.
It is, and you
spot.
can't.
So.
You can't change my mind. Some people may think, well, that's interesting, but it's, and I think other people that have had these things have been through the same thing, They
Right.
can't prove it. They can't whatever. But at the same time, we can't live our lives being in fear of something that may or may not happen. You know,
Yep.
so you just, I mean, somebody asked the other day about it. I said, look, the best thing you can do at this point, whether it's UFOs, paranormal, politics, whatever, just be the best human being you can be every day.
Right.
Be kind to people every day, even when you would like to slap them about a bit. You've got to be kind, and that
Yeah.
doesn't mean you get walked on. That's not what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
you've got to be a decent human being, which means that yeah. I mean, I collect every version of the golden rule I can find. Every religion,
Right.
every spiritual belief system, even the ancient Egyptians
Yep.
have the equivalent of treat people the way you want to be treated. And it doesn't say you have to
Yep.
love them. It doesn't
Yep.
say that you have to love them or you don't have to like them. Probably a better way to say this, you don't have to like them, but you do need to love them. Even the ones you don't like. And it's hard. It's very hard to do. And I mean, I have trouble with it too.
Mm-hmm. Dave, I think
I think I am. Yeah, that's an important distinction to make, Darlene. Is that there are, right now there are people who are very upset and very angry and very scared and confused about what's going on in the world, and what some of them are doing, not most of them, but just some of them are acting out violently and acting out aggressively. And I think you're right. That's not the answer. It's the golden rule. It always has been the answer, right?
Always. I mean, people are believing that. That has been, like I said, I've got a whole, I could send them to you if you ever want them. I started collecting them years ago. And it's amazing how many people from every religion, indigenous people, formal religions, philosophers, that's basically about how you treat people.
Mm-hmm,
You don't have to treat them super well, but you just need to treat them the way you would like to be treated, which you know how you like to be treated. You want people to look on you with kindness, even if they don't like you. You don't want them to call you a name or be mean to you.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds simple, but it's not. It's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah, that's like most things, right?
Right.
That are simple. They're not as
The
simple and
things
easy
that
are two
matter
different
are
things.
that way.
Mm-hmm.
As we are winding things down, I guess we're steering towards the end. I remembered a comment you made, I think, on the Perception show, that time is probably not as linear as we think it is, but it sure is convenient for living out lives. Being alive is without time, it'd be trickier to be alive.
Well, I will say this: if you're a living human being, you're in the time stream. As soon as you leave the body, any being that is not physical probably does not recognize time. Time is something we have to have. It's our perspective about where we are at a certain, in our lives. And for our perspective and history and all that, time is like that marker we need, that thing we have to grasp onto. It keeps us sane, I guess, in some ways. Because if we didn't have time, if time disappeared tomorrow, if nothing else happened, but the concept of time, we would be back in the Stone Age, because I don't think those people had concept of time like we do.
I see what you mean.
I just don't think they did. I think, especially, once they became more sophisticated and they had to deal with other people, and then when they'd say, well, when the sun is high in the sky, we're going to meet and do this. That was their clock, was nature. And now our clock is nature plus imposed constraints of being a human being, where you have to get up at 5 a.m, get dressed, brush your teeth, eat breakfast, go to work, and you have to be at work at a certain time and leave at a certain time. That's what we have imposed on ourselves as human beings.
Which is kind of separate and beyond survival. Like, obviously we go to our jobs to make money, to make food, but that's different than waking up and saying, I'm going to find food to put in my mouth.
Exactly. It's a totally different thing. So ancient people didn't live with time in the way that we do. And the more time goes on, the more stricter things that we impose on ourselves. A president is going to be a president for 4 years. You're going to be in the Senate for these number of years. I've got to go to the grocery store by 10:30 or else the store will be closed. I mean, it's like everything in life is dominated by time. And I've had other incidents involving time that are just really weird. And I don't know. I can tell you this.
What you said,
I can deal with it. I don't know if other people could.
It reminded me of Erwin Schrödinger's book. Erwin Schrödinger wrote a book called What is Life? In the 1920s or 30s, before Watson and Crick had figured the shape of DNA out. But scientists were catching on, well, there's got to be something that's encoding or transmitting information from cell to cell and from organism to organism. This is how life is propagating. So Schrödinger took a stab at it, and I thought his take was very insightful. He defined life as any system that regulates the entropy or orderliness of its own system internally at the expense of the entropy of its surroundings. So basically, I have to take in food from my surroundings and digest it in order to metabolize and keep energy to keep my heart beating, which is a pretty good definition for life. It gets into the hazy areas with like, okay, viruses are self-replicating, but that's the exact line. If that virus consumes a molecule from outside in order to spit out another virus, it's
still the same thing.
Definition of life.
It's not life as we know it, but it's still a form of life.
Right.
And Lord knows how many forms of life are out there that we don't have a clue about.
Yeah. And then entropy, I think, is the key thing, because scientists say a system left to its own is going to devolve into chaos. Its entropy is going to take over, but life is this thing that regulates entropy. Entropy is the arrow of time. I don't know. We need time in order to make sense of our lives. Somewhere around there, I think we're onto something.
Well, I think about my cat and like, what goes through that little brain of hers in terms of time. She knows that when we get up in the morning that we're going to put food in her dish. She knows that, but she has no concept of time or anything really in the way that we do. That's why she has such a blissful life, because she doesn't have all that stuff to deal with. And as we become more complex beings, we have actually cursed ourselves in some ways, so that we've distanced ourselves from nature for this device that's called a clock, or this atomic or on your wall. So I do think that nature is important. I think that so many people have no concept of how important it is to your health and well-being. And some people are starting to find that out. But it's very important for your health and well-being, even if all you do is have a cat. If you can't have anything else and you can't get outside or anything, that's what you do. And I'm a good example. I'm going to tell you this thing about me that y'all probably do not know. Okay, so I'm 72, right? So in May 4th, 2019, I had a severe brain bleed, a really bad one. And as a result, this side of my body, what I'm doing right now, hello, I barely can control it, and I have no feeling on to my toe.
Yeah.
So I walk with a cane. But I can tell you that there's other people like me, maybe not as in bad a shape as I am, that have given up and shriveled up. And I because of who I am, I made a decision that I can't live that way. I have one choice. Do I live or do I die? And so that day that happened, my whole life was upended. And I used to be my partner and I hiked all the time. I was 66. I was still hiking Big Bend and all that kind of stuff. That's the kind of hiking we did. So I was very much a nature person. So now I can't do that. But I still got this.
Yeah. I'm glad you shared that story, Darlene, because I've been dealing with something personal like that as well. That's kind of had to reshape my identity a little bit. My identity was wrapped up in my physicality and my athleticism, and now it's not. It can't be. I'm dealing with a couple different injuries that have just totally, turned everything upside down. And I've really been learning that my state of mind about how I'm experiencing this is the most important thing, and so that really backs it up too, is that like how I'm choosing to experience this is going to shape how the rest of my life. And so thank you. I just want to say thank you for sharing that, because I can do that too. I just got it hasn't been easy. I'm not going to lie.
It's not easy. I mean, you can imagine. My partner knows. He's been here since day one, before and after all this happened, and it's not easy. I have some days when I just want to sit and cry and feel sorry for myself.
Yeah, I had one of those the other day.
I allow myself to do that for one day. And then I know that I'm like, I think people are entitled to feel sorry for themselves at the time. People say, don't feel sorry for yourself. No, you're a human being. You would give that same compassion to somebody else. So you deserve to give it to yourself. And that includes something like this. It's like, we're not the only ones. There's millions of people that go through stuff every day. Horrible. Yeah. And I shouldn't be talking right now. And because I can tell you, the first 3 days after this happened to me, I could not talk. It was gobbledygook. It was the biggest. I mean, I remember in the hospital in the emergency room, my two sons were on either side, and I thought I heard that I was talking to them. Right? It sounded to me, but that's not what they were hearing. And at one point, my older son goes, "Mom, please don't talk. Please don't talk." And they put me in the hospital, and 3 days later, boom, I was talking. I don't know why it came back, but it did. And I don't know why I'm not all, like this. And
yeah, I couldn't even tell. Yeah, I had no idea.
And so whatever happened to me, it's like, and I told my son, I stayed with him for about a month after I got out of the hospital till my partner could get the house ready for me to come back. And I remember he said, "Mom, your shoulders is really drooping." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." I said, it's up to you. And while I'm here, if you see that shoulder do that, you say something to me. So he would. And I just learned to hold it up. I had to do it, consciously do it. And so, I mean, I still walk with a cane. I still look dorky when I walk. But I went to an event like about 6 months after my stroke with some friends. We're going to be there. And when they came in, I was sitting down, and my partner was off doing something. And I sat there and chatted with him for the longest time. And then they said, "Well, so what have you been doing?" I said, "Well, I just suffered a really bad stroke." They go, "What?" I said I had a really bad stroke. I had a brain. I didn't have an ischemic stroke. I had a brain bleed, so that meant that like a blood vessel just went like that, and that's the worst kind to get. Most people don't survive brain bleeds, and so they said, "Really? We didn't know anything had happened to you." So I knew that if I could fool people that I knew that knew me, that had seen me for a while, that it could be done. and that it's a blessing for me that I'm a stubborn old lady.
Right.
That my partner has to remind me all the time. He says, you have worth, you have so much information you can share, and that's what you need to be focusing on. So I try to focus on that, not so much on the physical stuff that I can't control. I've had physical therapy and all that stuff just like everybody else. But you can only go so far with it, and then your body, that part of my brain, I've seen the MRIs. It's a big black hole back there.
Right.
Right over here on the left side. It affected my right side, but it's like a big black hole. So I'm just saying that for you and for all the people out there, don't let this define you. What define you is in here and in here. And that's what you've got to focus on, and allow yourself to cry and feel sorry for yourself once in a while, but then snap out of it and get back on track. So like being able to talk to people like you, and I mean, I've had people actually track me down to talk to me. And so it helps that I've got people like you and friends and my partner and even my cat that keep that little bit of normalcy there, so that I can focus on what's in here and what's on here and keep going. And that's what I'd recommend for you.
Very cool. Thank you. Well, you've got some new friends from Mike and Dave from the Multiverse, so that's good to know. Good to know, I think. And that's one of the things we like to do, is just add new friends and new, people with amazing experiences to, our life. That's one of the coolest things. That we're not chasing money or subscribers. We're chasing humans. So that's part of what we do.
That's the best way to be. And the thing is I know that right now that because usually I don't tell people, unless like I've been online several times. And like you can tell by if you've listened to some of the episodes of Perceptions Today where I was on, that I've been talking to these people for weeks and months and stuff. And then when Paul actually talked to me, and I'd known him for a while, so he already knew about me, that I mentioned it one day about my stroke, and somebody goes, "What? You had a stroke?" And so it's like, I don't want to make an issue, but I don't want to hide it either, because I think it's important that if people know this. It's not who I am, but it's important to know that like I told you, here and here is what counts and what we do with it.
Right. Yeah, I noticed in your email you sent us at the end of your bio, it's also on your website. I guess I want to close on this. You really, I personally love C.S. Lewis as well, but the quote, and you cannot go on indefinitely being just an ordinary, decent egg. We must be hatched or go bad. Why do you like that so much?
I'm trying to remember where I found that. It was years ago. I found it somewhere, and I thought, yes, that's exactly right. It just resonated with me. I'm like, that's it. That's what we are. That's what we're here to do. We're to hatch. We are here to hatch into something better than we are. And it's something. It's a goal that anybody can accomplish. It's like, no matter how bad your life is, you can do better. You can do better. You can. There's little things you can do, even if it's just smile at the grocery guy, when he's checking you out. There's just little things you can do that make you a better person, and you're not going to be hatched until you learn that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today, Darlene. We really enjoyed it. We're encouraged and uplifted, and found the information fascinating.
Well, thank you, and I really enjoyed the talk too, and good luck to both of you.
All right, thanks for joining the Multiverse.
Thank you very much. We'll stay in touch.
Here.